YouTube. Um, and we can start. So hello everybody. Happy, what is it? Is it Monday? It's Monday. Oh my God, happy Monday. And I'm so glad that you all joined for our Tell Your Story Right live stream, which is going to be about essay writing. It's going to be in English because my guest speaker is Amil, who is a Fulbright teaching assistant in the Czech Republic. And I'm so happy he's going to be here because he has a lot of knowledge about essay writing for American colleges and universities. So before I leave the floor to you, I'm going to introduce Education USA a little bit. So on the next slide, you will see the Education USA is here for everybody who wants to study in the United States. So if you are a high school student and you're thinking about going to US university and experiencing the campus life, we are here and I am here to help you completely free of charge. So if your dream is to study, I am here to help you select the schools and just go through the process, help you study for SATs, Duolingo, and then send out the application, maybe even help your teachers with a recommendation letter. And then definitely when you are accepted, I'm happy to help you with your visas and pre-departure orientation. So all the steps leading towards you flying away to the United States. So definitely the highlight is that it's free. So please let me know. My name is Pani. On the next slide, you will have my email address. Let me know. And I'm very happy to connect with you and help you on your way to your American dream, if you say so. So on the next slide, it shows that our Education USA Advising Center functions virtually. So you can always send me an email. You can go to our website, educationusa.cz, and there is a link to my calendar. So you can even book an online session with me. It's also free, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. But if you are from the cities on the right, you can visit our American centers there. You can meet with my colleagues and you can borrow a book in English or you can ask them questions. So we're very flexible on that. And even the American centers are free of charge. So don't worry about that. And what we do is going to be my last slide. So our services that are free for you guys are definitely the consultation. So if you have any questions, there is no stupid question. Please ask me. You don't have to Google it or anything. I am here to help. I know and I understand that Googling things about the US education can be overwhelming and sometimes discouraging. So it's not that difficult. So please ask me. I'm happy to answer. We have a library. So if you are preparing for your SATs, I'm happy to lend you a book. And then we do live streams such as this one. And let me tell you, October is packed with like live streams like this because for all the students who are graduating this year, this is the time. This is the time for them to apply for early deadlines. So it's going to be very busy this month. But we also have in-person events. We have monthly meetings. So if you just want to meet others who are going through the same, you can always follow Education USA Czech on social media and you'll know everything you need to know. Okay. And so today you joined our Tell Your Story Right live stream with Amil, which is going to be about an essay writing, which is an integral part of your application. I know it's not something we learn at school that well. So that's why I'm so happy that Amil is here and he's going to walk you through the essay writing and the process of writing a college essay that stands out, which is the important thing. Thank you, Amil, for being here, and I'm so excited to learn.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. I think and it's great to be here. I think my slides kind of jump right into it, so I'll keep it here for a second just to give you a quick introduction about myself. But I'm really happy to be here. I just moved to the Czech Republic. I am from New Jersey in obviously in the US. I was born and raised born in North Carolina, then I moved there when I was 3, and then when obviously grew up there, and then I went to university in Northeastern University up in Boston. I graduated from there in 2022. I studied marketing analytics and finance over there, so really went down the business track. I remember my college application process was really hectic. I applied to 20 schools, excuse me, and got into 4 of them.
Oh.
So definitely a lot less than I was planning on. I got into Fordham, Rutgers, NYU, and Northeastern, and then I did pick Northeastern. I
Mhm.
did an early decision to University of Pennsylvania, but didn't get in. Then
Mhm.
I early decision to University of Chicago because I had early action there, and I'm sure
Uh-huh.
those are, that was a whole hectic process. But then get in there, so then we had to
Uh-huh.
rely on we're gonna get a decision, and then finally found a home at Northeastern.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I studied marketing analytics and finance there and graduated 3 years ago and had a great time. Thought it was really awesome and happy to talk more about college life and how that works later on. But definitely, the application process was something that was hard to navigate, especially for each school.
Mhm.
Um, After that, I worked in marketing analytics for a few years, and then now I'm here in Zlín, Czech Republic, as a business te and English teacher. So really excited to be here and share more about the college application process that I did, and some tips and tricks. And I'm learning a lot about Czech Republic, so that's for sure. So I know I speak fast, so if anyone needs me to slow down, feel free to just let me know. But
Okay.
so we'll hop right into it. What I'm going to talk about is basically like the common application, which is or
Mhm.
like, that's kind of the basic essay. So I just put a couple things. I'm more so just going to like honestly show and like tell it. I'm going to go against what I say here. I'm just going to tell it instead of show it just because things come to my mind as I start to speak. So
Mhm.
basically, obviously, I'm sure most of you either have already have it written or have most of it written, but the common app or your basic essay is to give a story about yourself. It's not just to say why you want to go to a certain school or why you want to study a certain school. It's for the um, college essay reviewers, the college
Mhm.
reviewers, I forget the name, I'm blanking on the term, to actually decide are you fit for their school or not based off,
Mhm.
who you are, what your story is, what you're all about, that kind of stuff. So it's
Mhm.
less of, I have these good grades and I do this stuff and I do this, and it's more about what makes you different than the person A, because everyone who's applying to your school, to the school you're trying to go to, like pretend, let's say it's Northeastern or
Mhm. Mhm.
NYU, right? If let's say 100 people apply to them, everyone also probably has good grades and does sports and does volunteering and works a
Mhm.
job. So at a certain point, they all blend in together. And the point of the
Mhm.
essay is to make you stand out, make people remember you. So
Mhm.
highlight more, fixate more on what differentiates you from the rest of the pack. So this is where
Mhm.
you elaborate on your story. This is where you elaborate on things that make you different from someone else, whether it's an adversity you overcame, whether it's a testament to your hard work, whether
Mhm.
it's something you struggled with. So for me, for example, I had a couple different topics I was toying with. I wrote about breaking my leg, which is honestly quite, I want to say, I'm blanking on the word, but it's quite cliche, if you will,
Uh-huh.
cliche, in the sense that, like a lot of people write about an injury. I ran track and field in high school, so it was kind of cliche writing about an injury, but try to tie in more into just like, oh, I broke my leg and I bounced back. But in terms of like, okay, here's what it taught me about myself. Here's how
Mhm.
it helped me become better or learn or become a better person, not just on the track, but in other aspects of my life, professional, personal, social, familial, things like that.
Mhm.
So you really want to make sure it's an all-encompassing story, and you using one aspect of your life as a vehicle to describe who you are. Because if you think about it, right, you have 18, 17, 18 years of life down, right, under your belt, but you're
Mhm.
giving these college essay reviewers maybe 10 minutes to digest it and decide if they should let you in or not. So you really
Mhm.
have to be methodical with the words that you use and the story you tell. Every
Mhm.
word every letter like has a lot of value because it takes up space, and you really can't spend a lot of time wasting it telling details that are minuscule, sharing things that don't really care that don't really matter to the story, but then also talking about things that don't paint a picture into who you are and why you want to necessarily be part of Northeastern or whatever university's story. So as I kind of said here, do the opposite of what I'm doing right now. Show, don't tell. So instead of talking about all these cool traits that you might have, like being a leader, being hardworking, or being compassionate, actually say your right experiences about when you did them. Right. So
Mhm.
for example, here I just, wrote two random things, but like let's say you work a job or you work multiple jobs and you balance all these things, right? Don't tell the school that. Don't tell them saying, oh, I do this and I do this and do this. Show it more so in the sense by painting that picture, right?
Mhm.
Maybe it's a walkthrough of a day in the life of yours, right? Maybe it's time when you juggle too much and then some quality worsened, talk about some sort of example as to
Mhm.
when this XYZ thing happened. So
Mhm.
yeah, same thing. Instead of saying I'm just a leader, talk about how you pivoted in one situation.
Mhm.
Hopefully this makes sense. Honey, anything you want to add or anything I'm kind of think
No, it did.
I'm missing there?
This definitely makes sense, and I would love to encourage all the live viewers. If you guys have questions, please use the chat box underneath, and I'm happy to just read it out loud at the end and reply to every single question that you have. There are some questions already, but maybe they'll be answered later, so we will leave it to the last slide for questions. But thank you. All good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's I think the biggest thing, kind of like setting the scene in terms of what it's all about.
Mhm.
Um, So if you're struck, I imagine most of you probably have already written stuff or have some ideas written, but in case you're still stuck or you don't love the essay you have written right now, some questions to ask yourself in terms of getting the ball rolling are
Mhm.
things like this you can ask yourself. Challenge you overcame, something that changed you, something that's important to you or someone, or even just even beyond this stuff as well. Like you can ask yourself, what's some piece of advice you got?
Mhm.
Um, I remember so the way I told the story of breaking my leg was and this is true. So I broke my leg. To give you some backstory, I broke my leg in a trampoline accident. I was like being dumb and I was doing a flip. I have a water bottle here, but I can't really see, but I was doing a flip. And then instead of landing like this, I don't know, landed like this. So I fractured my fibula and had to have like a metal plate inserted in my leg. So now my fibula had like this is my fibula or this is my fibula. There's a metal plate now like on
Mhm.
attached to it and then screws in it and then a rope tie to keep it like tight together. Um
Okay.
so yeah, so it was definitely a hectic or painful experience. This happened in Canada when I'm visiting my cousins. So I flew back home, got surgery, got the plate installed, and then had to relearn how to walk and all that stuff and whatnot.
Mhm.
But how I told the story was a lot. Well, I tried to be a lot more grandiose about it in the sense of painting that picture. So it's actually a true story. A few months before that, I was at a Chinese restaurant and I got a fortune cookie that said, you can go to Chinese restaurants and you get fortune cookies. So I got
Yeah.
one Chinese restaurant that said everything happens for a reason. And I was like, I was like, okay, this makes sense, I guess. But then when I got hurt, then I remember opening up my phone. I was in the hospital. I was waiting for the queue and I opened my phone and I was kind of very numb from the pain and I was just really angry and I was typing in my notes section, like why did this happen? I don't understand. Like this is so frustrating. I hate this. I'm so upset. My like track or cross country season was supposed to start in a few days and I was really excited for it and I was just so angry about it. And then, as the time went on and so on and so forth, I remember I actually somehow I kept it. I put it somewhere, and then I ended up taping it when I found it again somewhere in my room. I taped it to my computer, like
Mhm.
over here. Everything happens for a reason. And so then what I tried to do was incorporate that into the story. And it is true.
Mhm.
If that wasn't true, essay reviewer is also not going to know that. But so I'm not saying to not I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that it was true. But there's no way for them to fact check that, obviously.
Mhm.
But so I was able to kind of tie in the story of here's some piece of advice that I got that I at first took for granted and really didn't disregarded. Then something happened to me, and then eventually later it kind of came back to me, and I
Mhm.
remembered how true that was, and then tried to apply that to my life going forward. So it wasn't just a story about breaking my leg. It was a story about here's some piece of advice that I learned, and here's why I apply it elsewhere. So
Mhm.
when I have another challenge in the future, like a relationship, a breakup, it's not the end of the world, right? I'll get over that. Or like a bad grade on a test, or I don't get in to a university I want, or I get rejected from a job, or some sort of
Mhm.
thing like that. Right? Apply that same methodology, that same method of thinking, that same mindset to approach
Mhm.
and tackle and get over that situation.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I articulated that story.
Mhm.
And to tie back into the slide, same kind of thing. Ask yourself, what are some experiences that define you? Did you have to overcome any certain challenges, or do you feel like you had to go through some sort of thing that someone else didn't have to? And it could be
Mhm.
something as tangible as like I said, like an injury or having to move. like maybe you moved houses a lot, or maybe there's a familial or friendship issue. It could be
Hmm.
something intangible and something that people don't really see. Like maybe it's a speech impediment, or like my sister, she has a speech impediment, and she wrote about that. So it prevented her from being able to communicate and talk to people. And now she's trying to work in the medical sphere. So she talked about how getting over that speech impediment would help her, would translates her translates into the medical field where she can actually work on communicating with patients.
Hmm.
So that's not a battle or a challenge that you might physically see directly, like me
Hmm.
with a cast, but it's something that she had to feel like internally, mentally.
Hmm.
So maybe it's something like that, or it's like a learning disability, or it's something along those lines. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be, and this is just in the challenge section, right? This is just over here. So if we're
Hmm.
talking about challenge, that's something like that. So there's all these different ways to dissect it and keep going further. And these are just some questions you can ask yourself, trying to figure out, because it doesn't have to be so necessarily, not to use the word grim, but it doesn't have to be so like, here's my comeback story. It can be something, just something very fun and without any kind of like comeback resilience story. It could be just about something you love and an experience where something taught you something.
Hmm.
One of my ideas that I was gonna do was when I was in high school, I still do. I was like going to therapy, talking to a guidance counselor, just having chats, and I was really stressed. I really valued the importance of like mental health. And so I was going
Hmm.
to write my essay originally as if I was speaking to a therapist. So as if the
Hmm.
college essay reviewer was my therapist and I was talking to them.
Hmm.
And I was like, so the first line was going to be quotes.
Hmm.
And at the very end, it was going to be end quotes, as if this is just me, a speech, and then you're my therapist. And now there's just going to be a whole session of me talking to you as if I just came in and I wanted to share my thoughts about what was going on and trying to make it very colloquial. So I would throw in some like ums and uhs and like filler words like the word like, to make it sound very
Hmm.
much as a dialogue. Ended up, I think it was too much of a risk and it didn't really work out. And then it wasn't exactly what I wanted to be. So I ended up going with the challenge thing. But like I'm saying, you can toy around with different formats. There's all these different ways you can be creative. And again, makes you stand out amongst a crowded pack.
Hmm.
Uh, as you can see, I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to move on to the pretty much my last slide. But honey, anything you want to add on here? Or
No,
things that
it's
are that are
actually pretty good. And you are answering one of the questions like, what's too creative? Because this person is asking, so to become memorable for the reviewer, should I maybe like write it in a poem or something? And you mentioned the quote. So like what's too much and where is the line, basically.
yeah. I think you just don't want to, like I said from the beginning, it's a very like the space and the
Hmm.
words you're writing are very valuable. So like for example, a poem is awesome, but you don't want to sacrifice quality or like quality for the risk. So for
Hmm.
example, if the poem, a poem can only be so like you can only be so in depth in a poem, right? So
Hmm.
you don't
Hmm.
sacrifice the artistic ability for it to be a successful poem, right? A poem
Hmm.
has to have some sort of brevity, some sort of mystery to it, and you don't want to be too confusing to the point where they're like, I don't understand what this person is saying.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
definitely think it behooves you to be creative, but don't be too creative to the point where it detracts from your message and what you're trying to
Hmm.
say or the story you're trying to tell.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, like being like I love that idea of incorporating some sort of like artistic element, whether it's a poem,
Hmm.
whether it's like some sort of I don't know, like song or something. I don't know how. There's all these different ways to do it, and I'm sure
Hmm.
people are going to get even more and more creative in doing it.
Hmm.
My college essay like tutor that I had when I was growing up or when I was in high school, like he didn't love the essay that I wrote about the therapy thing, and so we
Uh-huh.
kind of scratched it. But I do think that it was a good route. I just don't think I executed it as well, and maybe my story
Hmm.
was more fitting to talk about in an anecdotal way than in
Hmm.
a I'm going to therapy and you're my therapist type way. But
Hmm.
yeah, I
Got it.
definitely think it's better to be more creative than not and take the risk.
Hmm.
Just make sure that you're not sacrificing and not sharing any like details that you really want to make sure you get through or stories you really want to make sure you're telling are not getting replaced
Getting
by
lost. Yeah.
your creative
Yeah.
artistic element.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Anything else that's relevant in this section?
Uh, we will get to that. We will get to that. Yeah. Go
Okay,
ahead for
okay.
your next slide and then we'll go through the questions. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah, okay,
Hmm.
sure. So this is just like a quick format. There's only so much I can kind of drill down in an essay. So what I wanted to kind of just really quickly talk about is a basic format. Like I
Hmm.
said, be creative. So you don't by many means don't have to. It's honestly probably encouraged to not go by
Hmm.
this. But if you at least want some sort of start, I recommend do this format, and then the creative part can come later on. The hardest part is
Hmm.
getting the substance out there. The
Yeah.
creative, the easier part is figuring out how can we make it, how can we spin it, right?
Hmm.
Like if you know, for example, you want to write it in the format of like a stand-up comedy
Hmm.
piece. Like I
Hmm.
wrote one essay one time in a form of a stand-up comedy thing, like where as if like my essay was stand-up as if I was some comedian, Pete Davidson,
Yeah.
Russell Peters, whatever, standing up and giving a speech. And
Oh.
I thought it was funny, but I realized that the format was great, but the content of what I wanted to say just didn't match.
Hmm.
It's like putting your foot in a glove, right? They're
Hmm.
great things, but it doesn't really match. So by doing that, by picking the creative element first, I tried to shoehorn something that didn't really fit in there. And
Hmm.
then it kind of was like, like this a little bit, right?
Hmm.
So my point, what I'm trying to say is I'd say write the essay first, maybe in this format where it's clear and concise and it's as boring as a basic essay. Then we can work on retooling it to fit some creative mold you want it to be,
Hmm.
to whatever to take shape of. But so in that same note, it's off with an attention grabbing hook. This is honestly probably the most important part and probably the like the what you have the what has the most room for creativity in the essay. Like I said, I talked about my broken leg, but my hook was first fortune cookie, and so I set the scene. I set the scene of I'm at this Chinese restaurant, Again, I don't want to talk too much about it because the Chinese restaurant doesn't really have any relevance to my story, but I still want to paint a picture, maybe
Hmm.
include like what food I ordered or what the smell was like or who I was with, some sort of scene to make it seem like that reader is also in the restaurant with me. Grab their attention and then bring it back to whatever the main story is. But whether it's so some people can do this in ways by asking rhetorical questions. They started off with quotes, they started off with sound effects like
Hmm.
boom, bang, or whatever, if it's like some sort of incident. So there's several different ways to come up with exciting, interesting hooks. And a lot of
Hmm.
times these hooks they relate very tangentially to what you're trying to talk about. Tangentially meaning like if what I'm talking about is here, the hook is somewhere here, completely irrelevant, and then somehow it ties back in, right? Like breaking your leg in Chinese food, don't really relate at all. But then somehow I'm like, okay, here's the connecting factors, fortune cookie, advice. Yeah,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. So sometimes these hooks are way out there, and the reader's like, what on earth is this essay going to be about? And then it's like, ah, now I see. Now I
Hmm.
see what it's
Hmm.
about, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So then story, yeah, describing what happened, that's pretty basic. Like again, you want to kind of show it, don't tell it. Add some flair to it, add some sort of like gravitas to it. Don't just say I jumped up in the air and I flipped and broke my leg, right? Give some sort of depth to it. And then this is what you want to really focus on as well. Why it changed, or what you learned and how it changed you, and why it matters. I've been talking a lot about a challenge, but let's say it's like maybe you started a business, maybe you did a
Hmm.
trip to like some underprivileged area and you learn it and it gave you appreciation about how much like your lifestyle. Maybe it was like something to do with your family member or anything. Talk about how it changed you, how it shaped who you are. Because even if it's not a challenge or something like that or an obstacle you overcame, like I've been talking about because I wrote about that, it's definitely something that has defined you why it matters to you clearly. Maybe it helps you pick what major you want to study. Maybe it helps you pick, like what your passions are. Like I know one of my friends, they wrote about their family uh their family had a lot of medical problems, but no one was
Hmm.
really smart enough to become like no one had the money to go to medical school. So what he wrote about was he's like, this is why I want to do it. I want to be the first one in my family kind of thing. And medicine's so important to me because his parents and his family didn't have the know-how to like treat stuff themselves, and he wants to be the first one. So
Hmm.
more of the story is figure out why, talk about a lot about why it matters to you and how it
Hmm.
shapes you. And then just a couple like quick story things like you wanted to take it sound like yourself. I know ChatGPT is a very helpful tool. Um and definitely think that it is helpful for like inspiration. I
Hmm.
wouldn't I would not have it write your essay for you. I would have it proofread it, like oftentimes what I do and not just for ChatGPT wasn't there when I was applying for colleges, way, way back as in like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. But like what I do when I'm writing any essays now or any kind of written piece is I'll write something or I'll say, hey, help me come up with a framework. Maybe you can plug this format in, say, hey, help me give me some hook ideas or
Mhm.
whatever. And then you can what I would do is I would write essays or write the paragraph or whatever, plug it in to chat and say, give it the context, right? Here's the story I'm writing about, here's the story I want to tell, so on and so
Mhm.
forth. Have it grade you on a rubric or a scale of what you're looking for because your essay is going to look different than my essay, right? The goal of my essay is going to look different than the goal of your essay. And so my essay should be accomplishing different things than your goal should. So not to be like on this whole AI thing, but if you're going to use
Mhm.
ChatGPT, which I think is a definitely a relevant tool,
Mhm.
prime it with what the goal of your essay is and what you're trying to accomplish and things of that nature.
Mhm.
So more of the story is you wanted to sound like yourself. You wanted to be in your voice because this is a reflection of you. And they read thousands of essays, a year, right? So they can read through, they can see through, if it's not your voice, if you're using a word that sounds smart but does not relate to the context of the story, does not relate to who you are or kind of how you sound. So
Mhm.
it's better to sound like yourself than to sound like someone who's super trumped up and high vocabulary because honestly that just paints an incorrect picture of who you are. So maybe talk right being more casual, being more colloquial, being more informal, depending
Mhm.
on how you do it in the context could behoove you. And again, that's like that creativity point that kind of gives you a little bit of a, oh wow, I'm reading an actual interesting piece rather than just an essay.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I feel like that's it for this slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, honey, any question? Anything you want to add in there?
No, definitely. I would love to highlight the fact what you said about AI and ChatGPT. Guys, you gotta give it a context. If you need some help, you have to give it a context and not just copy paste the common application prompt and just wait for it to kind of create the essay for you and then try to personalize it because it doesn't work and it's not you. And please also know that there are websites they can and that these websites can say how much your text is ChatGPT generated. So also running through that because it can say how much this is a human written text or not, and just kind of make be mindful of the time of these people, these readers at the universities. They're spending their valuable time on your essay, so make it worthwhile and don't just generate something and make them read it because this is you didn't put any time and effort into it. So just be mindful of that. Okay, but yeah, Amil, thank you. And there are some questions here now. So just to make sure, because there are some questions about it, we are mostly talking about the common application, which is for 650 words. It's not that long, like, really making that impression in 650 words. That's not like, wow. So you really have to think very carefully about that. But then, yes, there are some additional essays. So when you are applying like AMIL to 20 schools, there are some additional essays that are only for the eyes of the college or university. So I definitely would not advise you to be very specific in your Common App essay, meaning I wouldn't say, hey, I want to study at Harvard because this Common App essay is visible to every school you are applying to. So you want this essay, the Common App essay, to be about you. It's a personal essay. Whereas the additional essays are going to be very, very targeted on the college or university itself. And it's going to ask you that in the prompt. It usually says like, why Babson, why NYU, why, Northeastern. So you're going to know the difference, but I'm just going to say it out loud because I see some questions here. There is a question about how you wrote about you breaking your leg. So this person is asking like, how do I make an impression if I am not special? If there is nothing special about me, I'm a regular student. What to write about?
It's a good question actually. And I think first off, I think uh so I don't know who you are, but I'm sure that you are not just a regular person. I'm sure there are things about you that you could write about, and I challenge you to dig deep. So these are some questions. These are very basic questions that you can ask yourself. And I know, I guess the timeline is different. I don't know if the timeline is different here, like how it works in Europe or Czech Republic, but like I wrote probably several. iterations of one
Mhm.
essay. So I think I
Mhm.
wrote like three different topics, and then I wrote and then rewrote and then wrote and then rewrote and like
Yeah.
chipped away at it several times. So
Mhm.
I would really have a good, I would ask yourself some of these questions, and not even just these questions, but ask yourself, okay, like what am I passionate about and what can I talk about for
Mhm.
at length? And
Mhm.
if, and my name is Amil, and if I want one thing to be about that embodies Amil, what is
Mhm.
it? Right?
Mhm.
Like, what is
Mhm.
it? And ask yourself that. And it could be something as simple as like liking video games. It could be something as
Mhm.
simple as I don't know, like a story with your a favorite moment memory with your grandfather, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be, and maybe I harped on it too much. It doesn't have to be so much of like all these significant life moments that
Mhm.
happen to you. It can be
Mhm.
just like a great conversation you had with your loved one that really stuck
Mhm.
with you, and
Mhm.
you could talk about how that changed your way of life. And instead of it being, here's a story about one moment in time, it could be, for example, here's some piece of advice that I was given, and here's how I applied it to like four different aspects of my life. It
Mhm.
could be
Mhm.
like a time jump story. There's all
Mhm.
these different ways to do it, but it just takes some time to ask yourself and really think deeply about, okay, I have 650 words. How can I best to get this college board to learn more about myself in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
most creative and interesting way possible? But I
Okay.
promise you there are creative ways to do it, and you have something you can talk about for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. There is also a question about, you, as I said, this is a personal essay, but what's too personal so that it doesn't kind of, it's not the red flag, So if talking about maybe a mental health or something, if it doesn't raise a red flag.
Yeah, I see nothing wrong with that. Like, I think obviously like use your best judgment with it. You know,
Mhm.
like you don't have to give every detail. That's what I'm trying to say. Like obviously people like mental health is a huge thing, but sometimes there are some things that if you share, it might not benefit you. Let's just say, put it like that in your application. Like for example, if you struggle with something like anxiety or depression or OCD, like obviously those are really like impactful things and hard things to go through, and things, not just things that you'd get over in one day, but you don't have to be so specific on like every single experience with it, right? You don't have to talk about your lowest lows. You don't have to talk about like really the rock bottom peaks parts you've hit, because that might not be the best things to talk about. Instead, maybe
Mhm.
focus more on like how you survive those, for example. Like for example, for me, I have OCD. I didn't write about this, but like I wouldn't necessarily write about like some of the deep stuff that I do. Maybe I write some more about on the surface level, some
Mhm.
things that I struggle with, or some things that how it affects my way of life. I never think that I don't think that anything can really be too personal, but I do
Mhm.
think that there is a fine line between like you want to use your discretion, and
Mhm.
they don't need to hear all like your lowest lows. Because that's not their business. They don't need to know that. And it's also, you don't necessarily need to share that with them. And it's not gonna, I think, necessarily be the best use of space and words in terms of telling your story. It's not gonna put you in the best light.
Mhm.
And then again,
Mhm.
same thing. Show, don't tell. So don't just like tell like everything that's like wrong, but show into how you maybe bounced back, or how you survived it, or how you are, maybe you're still surviving it, and maybe it's still something you're working on and getting through, and fixate a lot about how you are working through that. Similar with like an
Mhm.
interview process, I do like tips for students when they're doing job interviews, and there's a common question people get asked is like, what's your biggest weakness? And
Mhm.
everyone's always fixated on talking about the weakness and saying, oh, I'm this or I'm that, or like I'm whatever. And I'm like, no, that question should instead be like 10% about the weakness, and then 90% about how you're improving on that weakness.
Mhm.
Like, let's
Mhm.
say your weakness is time management. Obviously, say that, but then spend the rest of that time talking about how you're improving on that weakness. So to tie
Mhm.
back into here, so to avoid that trap of maybe sharing things that are too personal or too detailed that they might not need to know, tell the overarching story instead of getting so focused on one detail that might not portray you in the best light.
Got it. Got it. There's also a question, it goes hand in hand with the prompts and so forth. And this person is asking about a repetition. If he's supposed to kind of keep one line of the entire application and maybe talk about some of these extracurricular activities that he already mentioned, but so that it kind of shows in a various um, in a various parts of his application. So maybe they'll read about the same thing in the recommendation letter. They'll read about it in the extracurricular activity section, and then they'll read about it in his essay. But is it like too repetitive, or is that what makes it kind of cohesive?
That's a great question. I think I to give a very annoying answer, I would say it like depends. I'd say
Okay.
like okay, let's say for example, like it's running track and field. Like that's just for me, for example, right? So like running track. Like if my recommendation was about it and other essays like well, other activity list was about it, and I talked about it in my essay, like I
Mm-hmm.
would say it's a little bit too like you want to show that you have more depth other than
Mm-hmm.
just like I run track and field.
Mm-hmm.
But if like track and field is so important to me and I'm trying to run at this college and it's like who I am, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's what my Common App is about. And then I try to change the other stuff, the extracurricular stuff to be something different,
Okay.
like whether it's like a recommendation letter or why do you want to come to this college? Like those other sub essays or subtopics can be about different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
If like that thing that you're talking about is like the end all be all why you want to go here.
Okay.
Um, but again, same thing. The personal essay, the common essay, can you have so much, it's very open-ended for a reason. So you can it can be less about like your hobbies and what you do after school and more about like something that's um makes up your DNA, makes up who you are, makes up what
Mm-hmm.
your values are. And then
Great.
you can still, you can definitely ensure can still incorporate like that same element in there, teasing that in there. And then that is good for them to see some sort of uniformity for sure.
Mm-hmm. There's also a question. There's apparently a person applying to 15 schools. And so he took, or he listened to you when you applied to 20. And he's asking if it's okay to kind of recycle the essays because he is not just capable of writing it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you say 50 or 15?
15, 1 5.
15. Okay, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. I think that's no problem. Recycling it like the same format, just obviously make sure the bread and butter of it is changing, like why
Mhm,
you want to go to Harvard and then why you want to go to I don't know, Yale, right? Are two
mhm,
completely different things. Or maybe a
mhm,
better example, why you want to go to Harvard and why you want to go to Stanford are two different things, right? Because they're all the way separately across. So you can
mhm,
keep the same same structure, like
mhm,
you know, the reasons why, like, like I don't know, the same structure, but the reasons why should change,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Harvard
Yeah.
because this, but Stanford because you plug and play. And it definitely benefits you to change up your writing style for sure. But I do think you can use the same like framework, no
Mhm,
problem. Just make sure it's not like the point is if I'm reading your essay and I remove and I block off the universities, like if I cover every single time we use it the university, if I can plug in any university, that's too vague. That makes
mhm,
sense.
mhm, mhm,
Like
mhm,
if I'm reading your essay and I can fit in Harvard in there and Yale in there and Babson in there and
mhm.
UT Austin in there, it's too vague. It should be hyper focused, hyper
Yeah.
centralized, right?
Yeah.
So the point where I'm like, when I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, this is 100% about University of Miami, no doubt about it. Like it couldn't
Mhm,
possibly be about anything else.
mhm. Guys, please, if you're plugging in school, just make sure you copy and paste the right school to the right essay, like just make sure you are sending
Yeah, yeah,
the right names because that's a bummer, that's a direct no if you send a
yeah.
Harvard essay to your Yale application. There is also a question, there are two more questions. So, do you recommend having a perfect English or just being authentic, even though I'm not like a C1?
Oh, perfect English.
Mm-hmm. Or being
Like in the essay.
authentic?
Uh, so okay, again, my answer is going to be annoying, but it's going to say it depends because I would say yeah, it does matter, and I would have your essay be like the best, like be proper grammar. So in this
Mm-hmm.
case, like consult like a teacher or a tutor or Chat GPT or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
Grammarly to make sure your essay is fluent and proper grammar,
Mm-hmm.
and like makes sense because in this scenario, if they read it and there's a mistake, and even if you did it intentionally, they might think that you didn't know that it was a mistake. The only exception I would say is, let's say your story is about learning a second language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing it in a very creative way. Maybe you're doing it like it's a speech or whatever, or some sort of, I can't think of it on the spot, but some sort of very creative way. Then maybe
Mm-hmm.
you might intentionally make a mistake And as long as like that's done intentionally and the reader can read this and understand that it's like an artistic tool, like an
Hmm.
author's kind of I think there's a saying like intentional thing done by the author, then it could help you. But otherwise, like I would make sure everything's correct and like that's something I wouldn't sacrifice.
Okay.
Might
Okay.
be too big of a risk to take, but it also just depends on how you kind of do it. But yeah,
Mhm.
definitely make sure the grammar's proper and all that stuff.
Okay, great. And the last question, and I'm not sure if we can generalize the answer to that, is that who is reading it? Like, how do I know that we are going to have the same vibe when I'm writing it with the person who is reading it?
That's good. That's a good question. And like, I guess so the answer is like you don't, right? You don't know if you're gonna have that same vibe. And honestly, a lot of time I view it as a crapshoot. I don't know if you guys have heard that expression before, but sometimes I view college applications as a crapshoot. I don't know if you so there's a casino game called Craps where it's really just like you're just throwing a
Mhm.
dice and whatever it lands on,
Mhm.
like that determines if you win or not. But it's purely random, like just throwing like a dice. And so
Mhm.
sometimes I view college applications as a crapshoot because it's at the end of the day, it's relying on human eyes and human error. If
Mhm.
someone reading your application is having a bad day,
Mhm.
that sucks, right? If
Mhm.
someone reading
Mhm.
application um loves also ran track and field and you write about track and field, like there you go, right? I do
Mhm.
believe, and it depends on the university, of course, but I think I do believe multiple sets of eyes are on your resume or on your
Mhm.
application. So it's not just like, oh, I'm reading it, make or break, and I had a bad day today, so everyone I
No.
read today gets rejected. So
Uh-huh.
don't worry about that. But I do honestly think like there are some things you just can't control,
Mhm.
whether your reader is having a good day or a bad day, or is happy or sad, or is
Mhm.
angry or whatever is out of your control. And that's all the more reason why your essay should be less boilerplate. It should be less, here's who I am. It should be less like boring and more like, let me grab your attention because maybe you're having a bad day and I'll make your day even better, right? Kind of thing,
Mhm.
or I'll
Mhm.
make your day better. So, it like your essay might be the best essay in the world, but there'll still be someone who reads it and probably thinks who probably is going to be like, I don't want this kid in. And that's just, you can't please everyone. That's just life. So
Mhm.
one thing I would say to that is don't write this for anyone else other than yourself. Don't write this so that Harvard or Northeastern says I want this. Write this, as I said, like write this to show who you are. Write this for yourself. Write this in a way that helps you understand yourself better because that's going to that's going to do it in the most authentic way. And I promise you that's going to be the highest quality essay.
That's
So
awesome. Mhm.
TLDR, long story short, like don't get too stuff in the weeds on like trying to appeal to every single person reading it. Because things are going to happen by chance and we just can't control that. But yes, college people on the application board are going to be reading it. They've read hundreds of thousands of essays probably. So it's just all the more reason to try to be as creative as possible and stand out
That's
because you're
great.
applying
Yeah.
against another huge competitive pool of other kids who are just as qualified as you.
Correct. Yes, yes. So, guys, please, Education USA offers this essay buddy program that includes Amel, by the way. So, if you have your brainstorming or if you have your first, second draft and you just need some guidance or
Yeah.
suggestions, you can definitely participate. It's free. Just let me know via email, and I'm happy to connect you to an English teaching assistant who is a native speaker, and people like Amel can help you with that. Do it sooner rather than later because the application deadlines are coming. So make sure you have enough time to just get a feedback on that and maybe rewrite it or polish it. Here, I'm going to also kind of top what Amil said is that you guys don't know who is going to read it. So there is no kind of a recipe on what does the school want to hear. Just be yourself, okay? It's not what I think. I can give you my feedback, but it's not set in stone that if you rewrite it the way how I say or how Amel says, it's gonna be the best essay. No, like you never know. So just be yourself, enjoy it. But I just wanted to put it out there that we have this essay buddy program to help you if you are completely lost or if you just need some final touches. On the last slide that we have here, there are our email addresses and our Instagram accounts. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. You can also write your questions underneath the chat, and I'm happy to get back to them, later on when you see this live stream. Amil, thank you very much for sharing your tips and tricks. Thank you for being an essay buddy for Czech applicants to the United States. And guys, thank you so much for joining us today and for your questions. Take care, good luck, and be in touch. Bye.
Thank you.